Mirtazapine is an antagonist of alpha-2 adrenergic, serotonin, and histamine H1 receptors. It is a drug used to treat major depressive disorder. In this video, I'll share my visual mnemonic to help you remember all the important information about mirtazapine so you'll be ready for test day. Our scene takes place deep in a swamp where there's trouble brewing, literally. A ruthless poacher has been hunting the local alligators to turn them into stew. But there's more than just gators in these waters. Look there. A mermaid has found the poacher's campsite and has come to rescue her aquatic friends. Let this mermaid remind us of mirtazapine. Get it? Because mermaid sounds like mirtazapine. Mirtazapine is a drug used to treat major depressive disorder. We'll talk more about this later, but for now, just remember this mermaid for mirtazapine. You know what really hits the spot after a long day illegally poaching? I hope you don't know the answer to that question, but for our hunter, that answer is alligator stew. Our hungry poacher dozed off while his latest catch of alligators was boiling in his stew pot. Fortunately, our heroic mermaid has pushed the stew over, putting the alligators back into the swamp where they belong. Anyways, let this spilled alligator stew remind us of alpha-2 receptor antagonism. You know, since alligator sounds like alpha, and stew sounds like the number 2. It's the alpha-2 alligator stew! Since this stew is being spilled, this should actually remind us of antagonism or inhibition of alpha-2 adrenergic receptors. Mirtazapine is an antagonist of alpha-2 adrenergic receptors. Recall from our dedicated video on alpha-2 receptors that alpha-2 signaling generally blocks or decreases neurotransmitter outflow. Therefore, blocking or inhibiting alpha-2 receptors actually increases the release of norepinephrine and serotonin. These neurotransmitters then go on to induce changes in mood. That was a lot of information, but for now, remember this spilled alligator stew for alpha-2 receptors, which mirtazapine blocks. Looks like our mermaid isn't too happy about our poacher's activities, so she's trying to cut off his social circles in order to punish him. See how she's crossed out that smiley face on that sign and even wrote a keep away warning? She must be trying to keep others safe from this poacher's tricks. By the way, let this crossed out smiley face remind us of serotonin antagonism. Get it? A happy face represents serotonin? Since serotonin is considered the feel-good neurotransmitter, right? And this happy face is crossed out because mirtazapine works by blocking or antagonizing serotonin receptors. In addition to being an alpha-2 antagonist, mirtazapine is an antagonist of serotonin receptors. Specifically, it antagonizes serotonin 2 and serotonin 3 receptors. This mechanism is still being studied, but it's thought that this antagonism modulates serotonin signaling, helping to increase mood regulation. In summary, remember this crossed-out smiley face for serotonin receptor antagonism. Our mermaid isn't content with just saving the swamp's alligators. She wants to put an end to this poacher's hunting for good. That's why she's also pushing a rack of his harpoon guns into the river. Let this breaking of harpoon guns remind you of H1 receptor antagonism. You know, since harpoon begins with H and gun rhymes with the number 1, so harpoon guns for H1. Got it? Mirtazapine is also an antagonist or blocker of H1 histamine receptors. This antagonist effect at histamine receptors helps promote sleep in patients, which we'll talk more about later. For now, try to remember these spilled harpoon guns for antagonism of histamine H1 receptors, and you'll be ready for test day. It appears that our mermaid may have come too late to save her alligator friends, and all her actions have amounted to is giving them a proper place of rest. In her sadness at losing her best friends, this mermaid is crying. Let this crying, upset mermaid remind us of major depressive disorder, which mirtazapine treats. Major depressive disorder is a condition characterized by a depressed mood and several other symptoms, such as a loss of appetite, changes in weight, and poor concentration. Depression may result from low levels of feel-good neurotransmitters, such as dopamine and serotonin. As you may recall from earlier, mirtazapine acts as an antagonist of alpha-2 receptors and serotonin receptors, thereby modulating levels of serotonin, or the feel-good neurotransmitter, in the brain, helping to treat major depressive disorder. In summary, try to remember this crying mermaid for major depressive disorder, which mirtazapine is used to treat. Finally, before we close, there are just a few other adverse effects of mirtazapine that we should mention. As we saw earlier, this poacher has fallen fast asleep, while the mermaid has gone to work. Maybe he fell into a bit of a food coma or something from eating all that alligator stew. Anyways, this sleeping poacher should remind us of sedation, a major side effect of mirtazapine. This means that mirtazapine can be used in patients with insomnia in order to promote sleep. That's pretty easy to remember, right? Let's move on. It looks like our poacher has put on some serious weight eating his fill of alligator stew. This overweight poacher should help us remember weight gain, which mirtazapine can cause. Mirtazapine increases appetite and weight gain, which can be especially helpful in underweight patients with depression or those with anorexia nervosa. This side effect is actually super high yield because this effect of causing weight gain is relatively unique among the antidepressants. So next time you see a patient with depression who's clearly underweight, consider giving mirtazapine as a next step in treatment. There's one other side effect we should mention about mirtazapine. It can cause dry mouth. We didn't symbolize this here because it won't help you choose mirtazapine from other drugs, but we figured we'd briefly include it here for completedness. All right, all of this talk about alligator stew is making me hungry. Let's wrap up and get out of here. Mirtazapine is a drug used to treat major depressive disorder. It acts as an antagonist at alpha-2 adrenergic receptors, serotonin, and histamine receptors. A few adverse effects of mirtazapine include sedation, weight gain, and dry mouth. These side effects are important, as it means that mirtazapine is preferred in depressed patients who are underweight or those who concurrently suffer from insomnia. Time for me to grab a bite to eat. I'll catch you guys in the next one.